Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So today's video, we're talking all about wedding ceremonies, and this video is specifically for those of you that are having an officiant that isn't necessarily a professional officiant or somebody that is a religious leader, or basically somebody that you are having get ordained specifically for your wedding, most likely a non-denominational wedding, and you're just unsure how to structure your whole wedding ceremony, as that's pretty much up to you when you go this route. So I'm going to discuss all of the standard practices and outline for a traditional or non-traditional wedding ceremony. So when you do have somebody that is like a professional officiant that you are hiring, whether that is religious or non-denominational, they typically know what to do. They will help build the structure and the outline of your wedding ceremony with you. But I have a lot of clients that choose to have somebody close to them, whether that is a friend or a family member, get ordained and then perform their wedding ceremony for them. And in these instances, the wedding ceremony structure and the creation of your wedding ceremony and what's going to be said and in what order is going to be up to you to be able to create. So I'm going to break that down for you today. So as far as order goes, when it comes to your wedding ceremony, you will get all of your guests seated at your ceremony site and have what's known as the prelude playing before this. So this is a selection of songs that are not the songs that you're walking down the aisle to, but are kind of leading up to those songs. So typically they're on the same style, same vibe as what you're walking down the aisle to. And you'll have a couple of songs that typically you choose that will be playing prior to the actual formal processional. So this music will be playing while everyone is seated, kind of gearing up for everyone walking down the aisle. Then you will have what is called the processional. So if you are having ushers at your wedding, if you're having grandparents, anybody being ushered to their seats, this is when this is going to happen, right before the processional. So this would happen during your prelude music and not during your actual processional. The processional then is what will happen when the official people that are walking down the aisle begin to walk down the aisle. So you will have then a separate song for this. So a processional song will play, and then you will have the first person that is walking down the aisle begin. Now, when it comes to a non-traditional wedding or a non-denominational wedding, you can do whatever you want when it comes to the processional and include whoever you want. Typically, most of my clients will have some type of family member included prior to the bridal party. So bride's mom, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, anybody that's like close to you that you want included to walk down the aisle, they will go first. So typically this is the bride's mom if they are not walking down with the bride themselves, and typically accompanied with a male family member. So it works great if you have like a male sibling or an uncle or somebody that can walk your mom down, or they could just walk down solo as well, or be not included at all. So that's totally up to you on who you want to incorporate, but any grandparents, parents that aren't walking with either the bride or groom, siblings, and any other family members that are not a part of the bridal party will begin the processional. Just before the bridal party, you will have the groom walk down, and that will be accompanied typically with the mother or both parents, or completely by himself, or accompanied with the officiant. So if it's an officiant that is a good friend, a lot of times I will see the groom and the officiant walk down together, or you can have the officiant walk out first, or have the officiant already up at the altar. And that's a pretty common practice, is to have them kind of already standing up at the altar and standing at the mic, and that is a lot of times the cue that I will use for the DJ. Have the officiant start everything off, stand at the mic in the center of the altar, and that will be the DJ's cue to start the processional music. So however you want to do that, and however the officiant kind of plays that role in your bridal party or in your group of people, however you want to move forward with that, it's totally up to you. So then you have the groom walking either solo, with a mom, with both parents, however you want to do that, just before the bridal party. Then you will have your bridal party walk down, and you have the option of having them paired off. If you are having a traditional bridal party where you have bridesmaids and groomsmen, typically you will pair them off and have one bridesmaid per each groomsman. You can also choose to have the bridesmaids walk down solo and have the groom and groomsmen file in from the front. This is most often seen in a church. If you're having an outdoor wedding, it's pretty common to just have everybody paired off and do it that way. So the order of this will be the opposite order of how they will stand up at the altar. So your best man and maid of honor will be at the back of the line when it comes to the order of the bridal party, and the person that is standing on the outside furthest away from you when up at the altar will be the first group walking down the aisle for the processional. So they will process down the aisle in the opposite order of how they will stand next to you and fill in from the outside in. After the bridal party, so after the best man and maid of honor have walked down the aisle and taken their spot, that's when, if you do have any flower girls and or ring bearers, this is when they would walk down. So typically, depending on the age and how many you have, a lot of times they will walk down together. If you do have them walking separately, typically the ring bearer will go first, and then the flower girl will be the last person to walk down before the bride. After the flower girl has walked down, then the bride will walk down, typically accompanied with her father or some sort of parental father figure, whoever that might be to her. For same-sex marriages, I have seen this done multiple ways. I have seen that one partner will go first and be the one that is waiting at the end of the aisle, and then the other partner will be in the back and the last person to walk down. I've seen couples that will choose to walk down together at the very end. However you want to do this, it's totally up to you. This is just kind of what the traditional standard practices are for a wedding ceremony. So once the last person has walked down, whether this is the bride or the groom, has walked down the aisle and has taken their mark up at the altar, everyone is in their place. Then the officiant would take over with welcoming everybody to this wedding ceremony. Now, when the bride is walking down the aisle, this is when all of the guests will stand, and this is something to just make sure that you're telling your officiant to mention, or even not necessarily even verbally mention. Typically, if they just do like one of these, most guests are aware that you're supposed to stand when the bride walks down the aisle. And if you tell your family members that are sitting in the front row to kind of initiate that, everyone will follow. But make sure your officiant is aware that they will want to stand when the bride walks down the aisle. And then at this point, when the officiant takes over to welcome all the guests, make sure that they do mention to have everyone sit back down. That way you're not having your guests awkwardly standing throughout the entirety of your ceremony. I have seen it happen, so make sure that they make a mention to have all the guests be seated before moving forward with the wedding ceremony. At this point too, if you are a bride, this is where someone will be adjusting your dress and your train if you have one, to make sure that it is not all crumpled or folded weird for all of your ceremony photos. And this is when you would also hand off your bouquet so that your hands are free. And I find that it's most comfortable to just grab hands with your partner as soon as you get up to the altar. You're probably gonna have a lot of nervous energy, and it's nice to just have something to do with your hands. So if you're just standing and holding hands across from each other in the center of the altar, that is typically what feels and looks most natural for all photos. So the officiant will welcome everybody, say a little bit of a greeting and a welcome introduction. A lot of times, if this is somebody that is close to you guys as a couple and is aware of your love story, they will likely share some anecdotes from the progression of your love story and your relationship, and be able to kind of speak to it from an outsider's perspective before moving into all the formalities of the wedding ceremony. Next would be readings, if you plan to have any. If you do have anyone coming up to give a reading, this is when that would happen, after a little introduction and before any vows take place. And if you do plan on having people do readings, make sure you have them seated in a place that's going to be easy for them to get out of and come stand up at the altar, just to make that as efficient as possible. And you want to make sure that they are going to stand in a place that isn't going to block either of you for any pictures, and also for the view of your guest. So usually works out if the officiant will kind of take a step back or off to the side, and whoever's giving the reading can just move into their place and be able to use the microphone that they were using. Next, if you plan to have any type of unity ceremony, whether this is lighting unity candles or pouring sand into a unity vase, if you're planning on having any sort of unity ceremony, this is one of two spots that this is typically done in before moving into your vows. After this, the officiant would then address the couple and prepare for the vows. So asking for vows, pulling out vow books if you're not holding them, asking the maid of honor best man to pull out the vow books if you don't have them. Whoever has the vow books, in whatever way you need to prepare for the vows, this is when that would happen. And then you would either have vows that are traditional vows that you will repeat after the officiant, which you can just find those online if you are searching for just traditional vows where you're not writing your own, or you do have the option to write your own vows. Typically, what I see most often with couples that are choosing to have a personal friend, a family member get ordained and perform their wedding ceremony as the officiant, typically most of those couples will then choose their own vows as well, as that's just an extra personalization when it comes to your wedding ceremony, but it is totally up to you on what you want to do here. But this is where the vows would take place. Typically, the bride will go first in reading the vows and then the groom would follow, but you can do whatever you want here. Next, this is another spot where you could do a unity ceremony if you're choosing, after the vows and before the rings. Although I do prefer it to be before any of this, that you can just move in straight from the vows into the rings. So then next would be the exchanging of the rings. Again, the bride typically goes first. You're going to put your partner's ring on their hand. The officiant will introduce the rings, say anything about the kind of symbolism of the rings typically and what that means when it comes to marriage. And whatever you wish to say here, they will just have some sort of introduction to bring into the rings. They will then ask for the rings. It is pretty common for the officiant to verbally ask for the rings, and usually this will be the best man will have both rings. Sometimes the maid of honor will have one, the best man will have one. If you do have a ring bearer old enough to actually carry the rings down the aisle, once they get to the end of the aisle, typically you'll have them hand off the rings to the best man, so that when it does come time to exchange the rings, they are already up there at the altar right next to you guys, whether that is the best man carrying both or him having one, maid of honor having the other. But the officiant will ask for the rings and then take both at the same time, and then typically present each ring to each partner, whoever is going first, the ring onto their left hand ring finger. A lot of times there are exchanging of kind of ring vows that go with this, and this is typically just a repeat after me situation for the officiant. Again, you can find exactly what to say right online if you need assistance with that. And then finally, the officiant will prompt you to kiss, and this is where everything becomes official. You are sealing your wedding ceremony with a kiss. Now at this point, make sure that you are communicating with your officiant to move out of the way right after prompting you guys to kiss, and then give them a second to actually move out of the way, so that when you get those kissing photos for your wedding ceremony, you don't have a bobbing head in the background, or just like the top of their head in the back of all of your pictures, or just a person's face awkwardly standing behind you. It's really great if you can have them move from one side to the other, be able to have a kissing photo without any obstructions in the back. Now I know in a lot of movies, it seems like typically the couple will kiss and then that's the end of the wedding ceremony and they immediately walk down the aisle. That's not really how it goes in an actual wedding ceremony. You will typically have the kiss happen, and then the officiant will still have to make the pronouncement at the end. So make sure that after you guys kiss, you aren't just running back down the aisle. So you'll kiss and then look at each other, whatever feels comfortable. Everyone's going to be cheering and clapping. And then the officiant will make any closing remarks, make any announcements that might be needed, and then do the official pronouncement of you guys as husband and wife, or husband and husband, wife and wife, however you are being pronounced at your wedding. And that is when you want to make sure that you guys are facing your guests. So holding hands, facing your guests, you're addressing everybody that is there to witness this union. And this is also where, if you are a bride, make sure that you are grabbing your bouquet back so that you have that for those photos walking back down the aisle. Once you have been pronounced, again, everyone will be cheering, and this is when you will head back down the aisle into what is called your recessional. So this will be another song that you will want to make sure that you are choosing and communicating with your DJ or live music, whoever is performing or in charge of music during your wedding ceremony. This will be the cue for the recessional music to start as you two walk down the aisle. A lot of times couples will choose to have some sort of photo op for this recessional too, so make sure you're communicating with your photographer if that's something you're going to do, like stopping in the middle of the aisle, pausing, doing a dip, doing a kiss, whatever, and getting that photo before reaching the end of the aisle. And then make sure that your bridal party is not following you down until you get to the very end of the aisle. So once you guys have already been down the aisle, gotten those photos, once you reach the last row of chairs, that's when your bridal party will then basically file out the opposite order that they came walking down the aisle in. So your maid of honor and best man will meet in the middle and walk down, and then so on and so forth until your full bridal party has exited the aisle. After that, your wedding ceremony is done and you are officially married. So a couple of notes and tips I just want to mention to make this as smooth as possible. When you are walking back down the aisle, if you're planning on taking more bridal party photos, family portraits, whatever you're taking afterwards, if you're able to do that recessional and kind of immediately go to a spot where you're going to be a little bit secluded and not in the same path that all of your guests are going to take, this is going to help immensely for kind of the efficiency of taking all those photos. Because if you end up kind of just waiting in the back or being in a place where guests are going to walk by you, everyone's going to try and stop and talk to you and stop you, and that's going to just prolong how long it's going to take to get all those photos done. So if you're able to just walk off into maybe an opposite direction of where your guests are going to go and have your bridal party follow you so that you guys can go in a different direction and not worry about being stopped and slowed down by the rest of your guests, this is highly recommended. So you want to make sure your officiant gets officially ordained, even though it's usually not a very complicated or long process or overly legal feeling process. This does need to happen in order for your wedding ceremony to actually be legal and seen as a marriage union legal ceremony. So make sure that your officiant is getting ordained. Typically, you can do this online pretty easily. Just make sure that you are researching your area and any requirements that might be needed when it comes to being ordained. Places do have slightly different requirements when it comes to getting ordained as far as what that process looks like and what is needed on the day. So for some states, they have like specific statements and sentences that have to be read at some point in the wedding ceremony in order for it to be official. So just make sure that you're aware of that and that your officiant has all of the information they need to be a legit officiant for your wedding. Also, if you're not having a wedding party, if you don't have anybody that's going to be standing up at the altar with you, make sure you have somebody, if you're a bride, in charge of moving your train and adjusting your train so that it'll be nice for photos, as well as taking your bouquet. You will need someone for both of those things to make sure that your hands are free and that your photos will look great. So whether that's your mom, your sister, somebody sitting in the front row, make sure that you're having that quick conversation beforehand and that you have appointed somebody to take care of those things for you if you aren't having anyone standing up at the altar with you. And finally, don't forget to sign your marriage license. You're going through this whole process. Make sure you are bringing your marriage license with you and making sure to sign it on site with your officiant before your wedding day is over. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. We'll see you next week.